guys, it's Tammy from LOL Custom Crafty Creations, and I'm here with Little Miss Oops Baby, and I am going to show you guys how to get off the pre-existing paint so she can go from this to this. Alright, for starters, you need to use 100% acetone. The brand that I'm using is Onyx Professional. It is straight acetone. There is nothing added into it. I've not tried any of the other ones for any other brands specifically, but as long as they're 100% acetone, that shouldn't be an issue. But I haven't also tried any of the others that have like the added minerals or anything like that in there, so I'm not sure how effective those are, but I would stick with this just because I know how to use it, so that's what I'm going to recommend. The other thing that I wanted to use and explain to you guys is that I use the cotton squares. These you can pick up at any of the stores that have any of the cotton balls and things like that, but these are better to use instead of cotton balls or the cotton circles, cotton rounds. Those specifically are a little bit too fuzzy, so when you're going through and you're actually trying to clean this off, some of those fuzzes will get on the doll with those ones and it's harder to deal with. So these are the ones that I found that are the best to use, and you can use both sides, so that part's really nice. Once it gets dirty on one side, you can flip it over to the other. So what you're going to do to start off is I typically fold it in half and just put it on top. I've actually thought about getting one of those containers for the nail polish remover where you just push the top down and it squirts it up to get it wet. So that's probably what I'm going to eventually do because that's super convenient and I do this a lot. So obviously I got it all nice and wet. It's just damp. There's nothing that's dripping, so it's not oversaturated. That is a big thing that you want to make sure you don't do, because if you do that, then it's going to leave too much excess on the doll, which in turn could end up causing damage to the doll. So I'm going to start with her legs and her feet. Actually, I'm going to take her head off first. That is always step one, just because I don't like having the head on. It's easier to move, and because Oops Baby has that hidden color change that's right on her shoulders and her chest and things, this is the easiest way to get that portion off. So I just slowly start, and as you are working with the color change dolls especially, once the acetone hits it, usually you will get that pink from the color change activating. Let's see if we can get that to perk up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and I've noticed the ones that don't have as good of color change, like the paint isn't very strong or bright, it doesn't do that as much. But you can see there it starts to go a little bit right there. So what you want to do is I take it and I just gently rub it in and try to work it to get some of the paint off. White is kind of a pain in the butt, and the darker colors are too, but it's all good. It does end up coming off, as you can see. So as I'm going, and you can also see as I'm going those fuzzies. So it's starting to get fuzzy because I'm working it and because of the acetone. So at that point, now I'm going to flip it to the other side so I can still use this. And I'm going to move her arms back because you can see just a little bit of the fuzz is starting to come off. So that's when you take the cotton square and you just rub with it and work it off again, as long as this part isn't fuzzy again, because if it's still fuzzy, then you're going to have the issues of it not going away. But because it's not quite as fuzzy and I still have time, but now it's getting broke down, so I'm going to move on and do the next one. And again, this is where that lovely nail polish remover squirter thing would be awesome. So I'm going to move to the other side and just gently rub. And again, I didn't oversaturate it, so there isn't going to be any of the excess just sitting on the doll, which is a big thing. So I'm also going to work on getting the legs. So I take this, and the best way that I found to do it, it's the quickest too, is to slowly do the work on the outside first and just kind of pinch and move it around as you go. It seems to get it off the quickest, which is really nice, and then you don't have to do a bunch of extra work. Now, one of the big things that I want to make a note of, anybody that has longer fingernails. So when you're working with the acetone, it does kind of affect the quality, I guess is the best way to put it, in the integrity of the doll itself. If it's wet with acetone on the skin, you can actually like poke it and leave marks and things like that. So if you're like me and you have any long fingernails or anything of the sort, be really extra careful or cut your nails first, because if you accidentally, say I'm rubbing this side and I slip and I jab into the leg on the other side, there could end up being a chunk missing there. So just keep in mind, you want to be really careful. Don't try to abuse it too much and apply too much pressure, because if you slip, it could end up causing problems. And you don't want to have to deal with that, because if you're not painting that leg and whatnot, you might not be able to cover it up and it might not look so great. So now that this one is getting a little bit yucky, I'm going to switch to the next. And as you see, it is getting cleaned off pretty good. So now that I'm getting to that point, this is typically where I move the legs out so that I can work on getting all the other creases. And make sure that, again, with that whole don't saturate kind of thing, that you don't let any saturate into the joints. Because if you do that, it seems to compromise those joints pretty good, but any of the excess of the paint that's in there, because you can't get the acetone out after that, it makes the paint goopy on the inside, and you really don't want that. That part just isn't very fun. I've had to deal with that one in the past. So through trial and error, these are just some of the things that I've learned to do that I found are my personal techniques that I like and that work really well for me. Keep in mind, what works for me, it may work for you. You might like my style, you might not like to do it that way. So it is a work in progress, and don't feel uncomfortable trying different things. If you think there's something that works better for you, find your groove. Do it, because you know what? Everybody is different. We all have our own techniques. And the whole point of doing these, especially with the customs, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and it is relaxing. And you don't want to have to feel intimidated or uncomfortable because something isn't working for you. And you don't have to do everything like everybody else. Be bold and be brave and be independent. And if you have any awesome techniques of your own that you would like to share, feel free to share them with us or send me a comment and I can discuss them and show them on here too, if that's something that you don't mind. And again, if you guys have any questions as we go along, I would love to hear them, because then I can actually go through and discuss and do a video on your questions or something that you would like to see me talk about or show you guys. So now that I've got in the creases, and as you could see as I'm working and talking, I'm trying to just slowly get into the joints a little bit and kind of rubbing in different directions to work that. Not all of that paint, this one came off actually pretty good, but not all of them will come off that good on the insides right by the butt area because of where the legs move around. So keep that in mind. You're probably not going to get all of it off. And if you did watch my first segment where I explained some of the different tools that I use, and that 3-pack that had the pokey parts on the end and the different balls on the end in the different sizes, this smallest one I typically will put in on the inside of this and poke it through so it's just barely on the inside, and use that to kind of get into the smaller spots that I need to. But it's not something that's majorly necessary unless you're really annoyed by it. Some people, from what I've been told, can and have removed the arms and the legs for this process. That's something that I have not mastered yet. I've tried it and it ended up damaging the doll, and I could not figure out a way to get it apart without destroying it. So I didn't feel that it was completely necessary. And also keep in mind, you don't have to take the paint off of everything before you paint it. Obviously, like with the socks and stuff, that's something that we didn't need it down there for what I'm going to create, because this is going to end up being a replica doll. But in that aspect, if it was something that I could have painted over had I been doing an Incredibles doll, then I could have left that on there. And just like with the eyes, I'm not going to remove the eyes. You can remove them if you choose to, but especially if you're starting out, and even for me, it cuts a lot of time. I leave the base portion of the eyes. I just take off the eyebrows and the side eyelashes, because those are ones that I typically redo in my own version and variations. But if you leave the eyes on, then you don't have to go through and do the guesswork of trying to figure out, the perfect edges and lines. And keep in mind, nothing, even MGA, isn't perfect with how they do it, but at least it'll give you a little bit of a guideline, and you can make obviously the colored portions bigger or smaller or however you want. And typically I make sure that I fill it out, but it'll just make it a lot easier and give you kind of an idea of where you need to do for placement. So that is one really good trick. I used to take the eyes off completely, and then I used to spend a crap ton of time going back through and redoing it because it took forever, and then I would do something wrong and then I would have to start all over. So that part wasn't very fun. Also, depending on whatever doll you are doing, you may or may not want to leave the MGA blush on there or the lips. Obviously I am taking that off, but sometimes if you have a custom that you want to do and wanted to leave the blush on or something like that, you can do that as well. So keep in mind, these are just little tips and techniques. I haven't found a really good way to do more blush on there. I'm assuming an airbrush might be a good idea, but I don't have one of those yet. But once I get one, I will play with that and figure that out. So now her face is all cleaned up and her body is all cleaned up, and she is going to be good to go. So, oops, there's a little bit left. But now that she's done, that's one other thing that I did want to talk to you guys about real quick is, especially with Oops Baby, because she's one that a lot of us use in the custom world because she is so versatile. So MGA, obviously, for their forms that they use, the molds to make these dolls, they don't always come out perfect. So you can see on the legs and stuff, there's sometimes the lines and the marks and things like that. Well, with Oops Baby especially, sometimes we have the issue with taking off that black, that it'll leave a little bit of the black in like the creases and the legs or something like that, or the dimples. So don't be alarmed if that's something that happens. It's something that it's just unavoidable, because at that point it's already in there. I've tried and tried. You might be able to use a toothbrush or something to get that out, but if that drives you that crazy, I'm sure the extra paint that's in the joints is going to make you crazier versus that. So just a heads up, that is something that you might want to be aware of, and there's not really a great way to get it off, but just be mindful that that's something that you might run into over time as you do more customs. But now we've got Little Miss Oops Baby done and ready to go, and there is no damage, so that is one of the big benefits. She is nice and pretty, and I just gotta get an extra fuzzy off, but other than that, she is good to go. So if you guys have any questions or comments and any other topics you'd like me to discuss and answer on here, just feel free to leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for joining me. Bye.